Welcome to the Diary of Discovery, the podcast where we delve deep into the human experience of healing and transformation. I'm your host, Jacky Clark, and each week we will sit down with inspiring individuals who have embarked on their own personal journeys of healing and self-discovery. From overcoming trauma to navigating life's challenges, our guests share their raw and honest stories, offering insights, wisdom, and hope to all who tune in. So grab your favorite cup of tea, find a cozy spot, and join us as we uncover the power of resilience, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. This is the Diary of Discovery. Welcome to the podcast, Emma. It is so good to have you here. Thank you for joining me. Do you want to just take a moment to tell our lovely listeners who you are and where you're from in the world?
Yes, indeed. So I'm Emma O'Brien. I am a hypnotherapist and strengths coach, and I work with professionals and experts and leaders to help them really overcome things like imposter syndrome so that they can fully step into and own their expertise so they can share it with the world and make the impact in their own lives and then the lives of others that they really want to. And I'm based in the UK, in the middle of the UK, in a place called Kidderminster, which is in Worcestershire.
Oh, amazing, amazing. Okay, Emma, so you know why we're here today. Our listeners know why we're here today, and we are going to be talking about your own healing journey and kind of how you got to this place in your life, as we kind of go through. So the first question is always take us back to the start. Like, what was the moment that you realized you needed to heal, that it sort of became a conscious thought for you, that you kind of noticed that something had to change? What, take me back to that moment.
Okay, so we're zipping back to about 12 years ago, probably now, when a number of things came to a real kind of head for me, as they do when you kind of hit rock bottom. So a little before that, I had been head down progressing my career. I decided that I wanted a career in HR. I wanted to be in reward management specifically. So that's an aspect of HR where we manage bonus schemes and incentive schemes and things like that, and the pay and benefits for employees. And I was like, yes, that's the place to be. It pays well. It's a good career. And so I'd had my head down and I was pursuing that. And I got to a great level in as a specialist within that field. And on paper, I was ticking all of the boxes because not only did I have that career, but then I had a new baby, and I was like, I had everything that I'd wanted. But the problem was that I didn't actually have everything I wanted because I wasn't very happy. I'd realised that having my head down and pursuing that career was putting me in a situation I just didn't want to be in. I didn't feel comfortable, didn't feel confident. I felt like I was wearing a mask. And I also thought that I'd really screwed my life over in my early 30s, and it was all ruined. And that I'd painted myself into this career corner and really didn't know how to get out of it. Getting pregnant happened at exactly that moment, and felt like a great opportunity for me to step out legitimately, rethink things. But of course, when it was time to return to work, the problems were still there and all needed to be faced. And that is when the healing journey really needed to begin.
Mm, yeah, I can relate with the career climbing and ticking all the boxes and it just still not feeling good and still not working, and you're kind of thinking, what the hell have I done wrong? I did everything I was supposed to and it still hasn't worked out how it was supposed to. It's quite a surreal feeling, I think, when you kind of realize that for the first time.
It is, and it's incredibly disconcerting because I think my initial response, as I've probably alluded to, was kind of like, it'll go away. Like there's a sit and wait kind of thing. I don't know what to do. Couldn't see a way out. But then when I went back into the workplace, it was an opportunity for me to start to kind of address those feelings, and that was incredibly vulnerable.
Oh,
Because it,
absolutely.
yeah, it meant admitting to myself that I needed to do something to change direction, and not only admitting to myself, but revealing to other people in the workplace that I wasn't in the right place and that I needed to do something different.
I think there's a massive vulnerability in admitting to other people that you are not as happy as you have pretended to be, because there is a pretense in, you've done all of the things you feel like you should be happy. And I don't know about you, but I kind of had this feeling of like, oh, maybe I'm going to seem really ungrateful because I've got the good job and I've got the properties. And I mean, I didn't have kids, but like I was going on regular holidays and like doing all of the things that apparently should make you happy. And I felt kind of like I was being really ungrateful to actually be like, oh, actually, I'm really not happy. Did you kind of feel that?
Yeah, so that resonates a lot with me. I actually felt quite selfish. I was like thinking, who are you to ask for to be feeling this way? Actually, that was the thing. Hang on a minute, you're so self-absorbed, so self-centered. You know, those were the thoughts that were going on in my mind, and what I was experiencing. So just for a little bit of context, when I went back to work, I did say, look, I don't want to go back full time, and I don't believe I can do the role that I was doing full time anyway. And so I was able to switch into a project role, which gave me something different to do during that period of time, which kind of, again, took me away from the initial thing. But the problems weren't going away for me. And what I realized was that I was still like in this hole, now sleep deprived on top of it as a mom, coming back to work, still getting up a couple of times a night, still feeling massively vulnerable and a bit like an imposter in the workplace. And on top of that, dealing with these feelings of feeling shame and selfish and self-absorbed, and why aren't I happy, and all of those sorts of things, and going through this routine every day of crying like as a release on the way to work, but knowing that if I stopped at a certain point in my journey that people wouldn't know. So I had to make sure I stopped crying by this point so that I could like freshen my face up and then appear at the desk with my mask on. And then the same thing would happen on the way home, where I would be like, release, 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 stop here, because if you don't, your husband's going to, like Mark's going to know that you've been crying, and he'll be worried. So I was literally in this like pressure container, feeling this way.
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh, that it just is so like I know the process is so worth it, but when you hear things like that, like it's so hard when you get started. It's so hard. And one of the things I always like to ask people is like, what did you have to embrace in yourself? Like what darkness? And I think a lot of that you've kind of said, that shame, that guilt, like your own darkness that you had to kind of embrace in order to get through to the other side of this. And like, is there anything else that you think that you had to really embrace in yourself in order to start this journey and move through?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things in terms of darkness. I think it was in that process of at that point in time with that mindset and that physical pressure. I could feel it like pins and needles in my scalp. It really was like hitting that kind of point of like it couldn't go on. And I pranged my car, like I was driving, and I like was so not resourceful enough really to be driving, and I hit the car off a curb, and I was like, that was my moment. I could kill myself driving if I'm not careful. And so I had to embrace that, like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what the solution looked like, but I knew that I had to do something, and that was going to need me opening up,
Mm.
and that was like to actually kind of bear that. And like I think when I reflect back on it, it's like it's no wonder, because we were a family that didn't really talk about our feelings. Everything was sort of kept a lid on, and normal family, no scandals, no this, and all of that kind of, it looks perfect on the surface.
Mm.
But I think what I appreciate looking back now is that nobody's perfect, no family is perfect. But the need to sort of maintain that picture and that mask, and then suddenly realizing that if I was going to get through this, I had to take it off. I had to let go of all of that image of that, and get gritty, get vulnerable, and just go, this is me. Like, this is the real me, and I'm in trouble, and I need some help. And I think that is probably the biggest sort of, yeah, darkness, as you call it, but that moment of like, oh, I'm gonna have to do this.
Absolutely. And what happened when you admitted that to yourself and started to have those conversations with, the people around you? What was the sort of process? Because we'd love to say, oh, I decided and then it was fixed and everything was great, but like it's never that quick.
It
It's
so
a
wasn't that
process.
quick. Yeah, it was like, I guess there was relief. For me, there was initial sort of like, so some of this like pressure cooker, it's like as if the valve had been opened a little bit, and I was at least, so I knew that relief was worth it. And really the option for me back then, I didn't know any fraction of what I knew now, and I don't think there was as much awareness, or narrative around mental health and depression at that point in time, really at all. People just didn't talk about it. And so the option for me really was to go to the doctors. And so I went to the doctors, and I just, it's such a transactional process when I think about it. So really it was a process of like, I did a tick sheet, and they were like, yes, no wonder you feel so bad, you're moderately depressed, here, have some tablets. And I never wanted to have tablets. That's one thing I did know, but like, I didn't have anywhere else to go. I was like, I just need some relief from this. And so that was what happened next, was this period of time which gave me some breathing space, but like of going and telling my story to a stranger over a desk, and then kind of looking at their computer and going, here, have some tablets. And then the next time it'd be prescription, how are you feeling? Well, I'm kind of okay. Right, do you want some more tablets? Well, I kind of guess so. We'd recommend you stay on them. Okay. And this kind of happened for a period of time, and I was like, I just don't want to be on these anymore. And so I talked to them about reducing, and came off, but unfortunately I hadn't addressed the real issue. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah,
And so when the
absolutely.
symptoms and the feelings all started to come back again, I was like, oh, that wasn't the answer. And I felt really
Mm,
disappointed, and then
mm,
a little bit ashamed, like, why can't I sort this out? Why has this come back? I need to just accept that I need the tablets again. And so kind of it was a bit like that for probably about 18 months, and then there was a little bit of a turning point.
mm. It's really, really interesting because so many people don't, I think, understand even now that we talk about depression and we talk about healing way more than we used to. A lot of people don't understand that healing is actually a skill. It's actually a skill set that you learn how to do. It's not just, something that you magically do or magically just process through, or like there's no magic behind it. Like, it is genuinely a skill and hard work, and like you have to take the action. So I think it's so normal for, you take the tablets, you come off the tablets, nothing's changed. because nothing's changed, because you're still living exactly the same way. You were just kind of numbing. And I mean, I've got nothing against tablets, if people need to take them, it's absolutely fine. Like everyone's journey is their journey. It's perfect. But I think that they have to be in conjunction with other things. And I think that that's something that, again, so many people didn't really recognize or understand when we kind of first came into this process of discussing depression and healing and all of that. So what was that kind of like change once you realized, okay, this hasn't worked? Like what were the things that you changed?
Well, there's been a few distinct moments, like real kind of like turning points, and this was the first of them. I went to the GPs again because I'd quite often just made an appointment and there'd been a different GP each time I'd gone. No one was really interested in my story and who I was, and it was just like I say, this transactional process. And then the one day I went to the GP that my parents went to her, and they said, "Oh, she's really lovely. Go to her." So I went to this different GP, and she looked at me and she said, "How are you?" And I just chatted to her, and she went, "One in four of us experience this." And it was like one in four of us. Like she was seeing me because she'd been there. Like she knew what was in front of her, so she knew what to ask. She knew to look me in the eye and actually kind of go and relate to me. And it was the first time I had felt like seen in this whole journey. I was like, oh my God, I'm not alone. Like there is somebody else that understands. And then I was like, right. And she said, look, there's a guy I'm going to recommend to you. If you can afford to go and see him, go and see him. Cognitive behavioral therapist. And she said he really helped me. So I was fortunate. I had private medical insurance. I was able to go through that process, and I saw this guy. But again, yet another stranger across another desk to tell my story to, and I don't think you can get over like those that
Mm.
part of it, that part of healing can be like you've got to open doors, you've got to reveal yourself, maybe in lots of different situations until the right thing sort of starts to stick with you, and you kind of go, oh, this feels like it's giving me something. And so
Mm.
I think that's a really interesting part of the whole kind of period of time, was that having to sort of be open to revealing that, and trying different avenues, or different knocking on different doors in order for the something helpful to come along.
Absolutely. And I think like it's so interesting because everyone's journey is different with healing, and what helps me might not help you, what helped your GP might not have helped you. So I think that there does have to be that willingness, as you said, to kind of knock on all of the doors and try all of the things and figure out actually what is it for me that makes a difference. And then once you figure those things out, just going all in and doing the things and making like that the real sort of focus. And I guess like I know from my own journey as I was going through, like even after having some really good breakthroughs and finding some really good people to help, there were still moments where I would sit by myself and I would think, I don't think I'm going to make it. Like, I don't think I'm going to get through this. I don't think this is ever going to get better. Did you have moments like that where you just thought like I'm not going to be able to change this, or I'm not going to be able to get through this?
I did. I did. I think that was probably during the period of time when I was on not antibiotic, antidepressants even, and where I kind of felt that this was not a long-term solution. And then when I found the CBT guy, that was like a massive aha moment, because it's probably around the same sort of time that I'd heard someone talking on the radio as well around depression, and it totally reframed it in my mind, around it being the curse of the strong. I was like, oh, it's not because I'm weak. It's because I'm strong and I'm trying to put too much through my own brain, if you like, that's creating this issue. And I think the combination of those two things started to make me kind of totally reframe my situation from one of helplessness into one of hopefulness, because it enabled me to see that, okay, so it's not because I'm weak. It's because I'm trying to do too much. I'm just like I'm striving too much. I'm expecting too much of myself. And the other aspect of it was, it's my thoughts, the way I'm thinking, and some of the habits that I've got into around how I'm thinking that's massively affecting how I'm feeling. And so actually I have more dominion over my own situation than I ever thought possible. I think I was looking at how could I fix myself and what would help me fix myself, rather than realizing that actually the answers were all going to come from within me, and that I just needed a facilitator for that, rather than a fix or a cure.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that that was the biggest change in your outlook as you kind of went through this process? Do you think that was the biggest sort of shift in your beliefs as you went through?
I think it was. So I think in terms of like, I suppose the image that just came into my mind was like sinking downwards in underneath water, like when you're kind of going down towards rock bottom and you feel like you're kind of just like, you've almost let go of the side and you're sinking down, you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this is horrible, versus sort of looking up and seeing that there's a light and you can see the surface. That was like the first sort of like, oh, there's the light to swim towards. That was it. Like that was the start. And I can remember that giving me a huge amount of relief. And it was a strategy as well. And it was something that I had the power and control over, which felt extremely empowering to me. But I can remember going through several, like maybe 8 sessions with this guy. And I got to the last one and I was a bit like, do you know what? I feel like I'm done with this, but I still don't feel like like I feel okay, but I still feel like there's more. And I remember the words that he said to me. He said, Emma, I think you're waiting for an aha moment that's never going to come. And I was a bit like, I sat with that for a bit. I thought, no, I'm not going to accept that. I don't believe that to be true.
Mm,
I believe that there is more to life and that we don't have to just survive it, we can thrive in it. And that's like, it totally ignited a movement within me to go, right, let's ramp this up a bit now. We're gonna keep on this path. We're gonna find out more and discover more. And I think the biggest thing that I learned around this was that which was different to how I'd approached my entire career before that, which was, instead of having like, I'm going there, I'm going to achieve that, I'm going to get my head down and get there, to actually like, I don't know where the end, like, I can't really see the whole journey ahead of me, but I'm going to trust. It's like driving in fog, where as you drive and you head off in a direction, like the next, I don't know, 6, 10 feet, however many feet ahead of you, you can see.
mm,
And I just was like, and so I think from an outlook perspective, that was what happened, was
mm,
I was just like, it doesn't have to be this planned, your life doesn't have to be this planned sort of step by stepping stones to a certain destination, that
mm,
actually you can form that as it goes, and lean into that and see where it leads.
mm.
And so yeah, that big, that was a big shift.
Oh, absolutely. And again, like I can absolutely resonate with that in when I was younger and sort of starting out my career and my life, I had such a set plan. I had a 10-year plan and I was going to, bearing in mind that I wasn't even dating my partner at this point. I was going to be married, own a house, have kids. Like I was going to do all of these things didn't even know who the person was I was going to do them with at that point. And I had such a strict plan as to what everything had to look like. And as we were kind of going through, I mean, we did end up following most of that plan. But as we did more and more of it, and I got further into that plan, I started to think, I don't know if I like this plan. I don't know if this is the plan that I want to follow. And it was this real kind of wake up moment of just being like, oh my gosh, like I set this plan when I was like 15, had no idea what my life was going to hold, what type of person I was going to be, like literally just no idea who I was going to marry, what they were going to want from their life. Like there was just no consideration for anything else other than these are the 5 steps that everyone's supposed to fulfill. So I'm going to
Yeah.
fulfill them in the best possible way and, get them done regardless of if they actually make me happy or not. And so I can really resonate with that change of like now I'm very much like the next thing will come and it'll be great and who knows what it is, but it'll be wonderful. I know because my life is always wonderful. Like it's a very different outlook. So I absolutely love that. So as you were going through, and I think like I could already see the kind of pattern and the link here. But would you say that as you went through your own healing journey, you started to find this kind of new purpose? Obviously, I know massively what your business does, and I can see the link. So, like,
Yeah.
how did that link start forming? How did you move across into this new way of working and sort of link that like purpose bit through your healing?
Yeah. So there's kind of two tracks that were happening sort of simultaneously in my life. So there was the depression that was happening, and then there was the career aspect where I was like, right, I wasn't happy. I needed to make a change. I came back from maternity leave. I managed to pick up some project work, but it was the manager that I had at that point in time. Again, another defining moment, just got me to see things very, very differently. She asked me this question. She said, what are your strengths? And I was like, I don't know. And I was like, I really don't know. And now I feel embarrassed and ashamed that I actually don't know. Like, I kind of know what I don't like. I certainly don't like the work that I was doing, and I know what I'm not good at. Like, but can I really articulate? Do I even have a language for what I am good at? No. And so I took a strengths assessment and I got massively into the whole strengths psychology movement because as I looked at it, I was like, this makes so much sense to me because psychology up until the sort of 1920s had focused purely on sort of what's wrong with people. And then this guy, Don Clifton, asked the question, what if we focus on what's right with people instead of what's wrong with them? And this whole sort of idea of, this shift that I'd gone from sort of what can I find to fix me and cure me? It's I actually suddenly became a question of what's right about me, what's already good about me. And that's when I started to realize just how much as human beings we don't see ourselves, like we don't understand ourselves at all. We don't come with a manual. In fact, what we do come with is a heap of conditioning about what other people have said we are and what other people expect of us, etc. And it's only when you have these like moments where you kind of go, this isn't right, and you butt up against it, that you suddenly realize you don't know yourself, that you've kind of, been swayed along with all of this other people's, kind of all of the labels you pick up, all of the expectations from parents and other people around you and things. And then you've got to kind of unravel it and kind of go, well, what's the truth of who I am? And how can I build from there? And so that was really what happened. And I got to do that from a career perspective through the strength stuff, because that enabled me to see then what was, what was in front of me and have a form of reference of making decisions against, that feels like it would fit really well with this set of qualities. And I can see these set of qualities in me. I probably didn't experience them as strengths. I probably thought they were weaknesses or nothing special, like everyone does. If something comes naturally to you, of course you don't think it's anything special. So like that whole process of just starting to go, well, I believe that these things are actually who I am. I can see these, and the more I lent into them, the more I started to trust in them, and the more I made decisions against them and using them, those decisions turned out to be great decisions where people would say, oh, you're really in your element, you're really thriving in your work, etc. So that was like a major, major, major factor for me.
Mhm.
But then, of course, this journey is never linear, is there? And there was another moment that happened.
It never is. It never is. I call it a roller coaster. It's never linear. Again, it would be lovely if it was just a nice straight, neat line, but
Yeah.
that's not how healing works. So what happened next? What was the other moment?
So this whole kind of career transition got me into transformational change, and I got to work on some of the biggest transformational change programs in the organization. And I was put in charge of being HR lead on some of these, because of my strengths of, being able to kind of manage stakeholders really well across the business, etc. And I became a coach because I needed coaching skills, etc. And this one day I was at a coach's meetup in a great place. It was like a church hall in Birmingham. It was brilliant. And there was this woman who had written a book called the Coach's Case Book, the 12 Traits That Trap Us, and she was talking about these traits, and she handed out this sheet that we could use with our clients around how these different traits were trapping clients, or how could we keep these traits in balance. And I looked at this one called imposter syndrome,
Mm.
and I read down the list of the symptoms, and I went, oh my god, I'm ticking all the boxes. Like I was the embodiment of this. So even though I kind of knew and was now making decisions based on my strengths much more, and I was being put into all of these, people were seeing in me these strengths and putting me in these really responsible positions, I was like dying inside, like going, what do they see in me? Who am I to be doing this? Someone's going to tap me on the shoulder any moment and say, you don't belong here. Anytime I had any compliments or praise, I was just like, oh, it was nothing, anyone could do that. When it came to performance reviews, and you rank yourself, I would talk myself down. I'd be like, yeah, but I didn't quite meet that. And I was like, literally, that was what I did. And the crowning glory, I did a change leadership certification, a graduate leadership certification in change leadership. And there was a peer assessment process. So we all kind of did this portfolio of work, created this paper on a study that we'd done. And I was doing my own, we had to do our own review of it, first of all. And I literally heard myself failing myself in my own review.
So you did the work and then you failed your own work.
Yes, I
Come on.
did. I'm very embarrassed, but also find it very amusing that I did that. And all of the other people around the table said, well, actually, we thought before you said that, we actually were going to say it was a pass. And there was stuff in there that I'd done that I just didn't shout about. Like the facilitator was like, well, haven't you created a new model there? Like, is that your own unique work that you've put in there? And I'm like, well, yeah. And she was like, right, you need to tell people that this is your unique stuff, and like you need to be telling. And it was that moment because I'd kind of had this aha moment of seeing that I ticked all the boxes of imposter syndrome. And then I had this experience of where literally I had failed myself, literally. I was like, you've got to do something about this.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a blinding light. So what did you do? What was the
Yeah.
next step?
Well, I created a summit at the time. So I was starting to build up my own coaching business on the side, and I did this summit called Surviving to Thriving, and it was all about helping mums who didn't feel good in any area of life to kind of feel good in their career as a mother, and feel more confident. And as I was doing I was reaching out to authors, and I was interviewing all sorts of people who'd written books and spoke on these topics. And I contacted Marissa Peer because I'd seen that she had written this book on confidence, and I said to her, would you speak on my summit? And she said, yes, 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 no problem. And I was like, oh, brilliant. She seems like a good author, and quite up there in her game. So anyway, I couldn't pin her down, but somebody else who had trained with her very recently in her rapid transformational therapy, this is back in 2017, she was doing a speaking circuit, and I said, would you come and speak to me about this? And she did, and we got chatting afterwards about rapid transformational therapy and hypnotherapy, and how the mind works, and how the conditioning and the labels and the expectations that we have growing up, and the conclusions that our mind comes to, form our identity and how we show up today, and how that limits us, or it creates the area of what's possible for us, let's put it that way. But that we can shift that, and we can transform that, and develop and evolve that through hypnotherapy was just so mind-blowing to me. I was like, what? You can do that? I literally signed up to become a rapid transformational therapist the next day, because I was like, oh, this is what I need. This is what the people I coach need, and see them bumping up against the same patterns all the time. This is what we need in the world. And so that's what I did.
Wow, I love that. I love how, like, everyone that I speak to, there's always a connection between the purpose that they found in life and the healing journey they went on. Because isn't it always that the thing we need the most is the thing that we can then teach in the world? Like, it's such a natural progression, I think. So from your point of view, what would your advice be for somebody who's embarking on this journey of healing, awakening, like whatever it is that people want to call it, but like they're at the beginning, they've realized something isn't right. Like what would your advice be to somebody to get started?
I think what I would love my former self to know, and having been privy and worked with people, I mean, as a hypnotherapist, I've worked now with people with depression, anxiety, and all sorts of things to overcome various things. I now specialize more in the professional development area around imposter syndrome, confidence, self-belief, and really owning your expertise. But I it doesn't matter what the issue is that people are coming to me for. Like, what I have understood now through working with so many people is that we are all flawed. Like, we all have stuff, and it's always disconcerting to realize that for ourselves, that there is stuff. Like, everybody has conditioning. That's how we are as human beings. Like, we have to have limiting beliefs, otherwise we wouldn't know how to operate and get on in the world. It's just that when we're striving for something in life, we realize that we're then butting up against it. And so I think that the first thing I would want people to really fully accept and get and trust is that it's really, really normal, and that there's nothing wrong with you. Like, you're not broken is the first, because if you spend time feeling like you're broken and you need to be fixed, guess what? That's what you're going to get more of.
Mm.
So it really serves no purpose. And the second thing is really, from my own experience, is getting to know who you are and what's right about you, because there is so much that is right about people. And if you can tap into and understand what that is, then you get to do more of it. And the more you do of that, the more better days you have. The more better days you have, the more better days you will have. And you get this upwards, swimming towards the light effect in your life. And you do get more synchronicities. You do get opportunities that open up for you when you are more in alignment with who that person is. And I think the other thing is that it's okay to get help, because there are so many, it's so accessible now to get support. But that to not expect somebody else to be a fixer of you, look for somebody else to be a facilitator with you. And I think that's something that my own journey has led to me to really kind of how I approach how I work with people is I like to feel like I'm alongside you on this journey. Like, tell me where you want to get to. Let me help you get
Mm.
there, but I'm not going to do it for you. I can't make anything happen. We're going to do this like together. I'm going to help show and facilitate and guide, but and I think that's a really empowering approach as well.
Mm. I love that. Yeah, I absolutely love that idea of, nobody can fix you, but somebody can help facilitate your learning into perception changes and belief changes. And like as you said, if you don't know what's possible, you can't aim for it. Like if you don't know that it's available to you and you're living in that limited space, you can't even begin to believe that there's something out there for you. So I think actually surrounding yourself with people who have got the outcomes that you want or are further ahead in the journey than you, or can show you another way of being is really, really important. So I absolutely love that. So as we've said, healing is not linear and it also never ends, as we know. So what is your next kind of focus for your own healing journey? What's your next sort of area that you're working on?
So, well, I was reflecting on this, like where am I at now, and what's happened in the sort of more recent past. And
Mm,
I lost my sister very suddenly in 2022, and that was like a major thing at the age of 53. Like here one day, gone the next. That was a very significant shock. And it made me question a lot of things, and it made me pull back in terms of
mm,
some areas of what I was doing. I didn't have the capacity. Like grief is a whole different episode. It is not linear. We don't have a manual like on how to deal with this. Like I don't think we're very equipped really.
mm,
It's similar to the depression journey. I think the fact that I'd had that depression journey was helpful because I was like, right, okay, well, what do I know from that? Like
mm,
breathe. Just if nothing else, just breathe.
mm,
Whatever, all of those things, coming back to my strengths, like really leaning into the stuff that I knew, really thinking about how my own mindset was playing out within all of that. But even so, like getting through all of that, now I'm really focused on my vision and my mission and my direction in my business. I really want to, there are things that I want in my life that I need to step up my game for. It's the reality. And so coming back to this identity work and who's the person that achieves that. And I think what I've noticed and I can reflect on is that my area of the possible during that grieving period shrank. So just to, to use the language that I was using before, our sense of who we are, what we're capable of, it grows and it can shrink. And I think that's one of the things that I've really learned. It's like, oh, like when you take your eye off the ball or life gets lifey, as we sometimes say, that it's like you could resent that. You could say, oh, that made me a victim, actually, like that took those chances away from me. Or you can accept that there are times when we can feel expansive and full of and we have capacity for growth, and for things to happen quickly for us. And then there are times when, through no fault of our own, things can shrink. And I really reflect that I've been through that period of time. And so what was starting to happen was I was having all of these ambitions again, and I really wanted to plug back in and I was expecting of myself that I could just plug myself back in at the mains and go, right, off we go again. We're going to achieve this, we're going to achieve that. Not realizing that there was a whole load of capacity building that I needed to do to get me plugged in fully at the mains. And so that's where I'm at, and that's the reality. Again, another lesson learned, that it's like it's okay that we can have those times when we shrink again, but we've got to meet
mm,
ourselves where we're at, and grow from there,
Mm.
and allow that sort of growth, and sometimes a little bit of shrinking back, and then growth again. But knowing that the perception of like how we perceive of that journey for ourselves is so important, because actually keep looking back and seeing that you're traveling a distance, you're still moving forwards, is so important during that
Mm.
period of time. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. Fascinating.
I love it. Yeah, it is. And I think like I always say to people, like my clients and my friends, and the people who I speak to as guests on the podcast, like healing is such an amazing journey. Like it's really hard when you're going through it, but every time you cycle through another thing that you have to heal, it does almost build a level of resilience in like, oh, you've learned the skills and now you can transfer those skills from like the depression into the grief, or whatever the journey is, the pattern that you take, like whatever that looks like. And I can absolutely see that as well in those skills that you learn as you go through this process are so valid and so transferable and so helpful if you can give yourself the grace to see them, if you can give yourself the grace to actually tap back into them. Because I mean, I can speak from a grief experience massively. We lost five of my immediate family members in an 18-month period, and it was so hard to sort of stay afloat in that way of running a business and trying to run a household and trying to, look after everyone around me and make sure everyone was okay. And, all of that kind of like additional stuff that comes with the grief, and having that ability to pull back on things like my strengths and the things that I'd learned before and the coaching skills that I had, and all of those different skills from being in different roles and different areas of life. It was so valid, and so I was so grateful as I went through that process. And I think that that's one of the beauties of every time you go through a cycle of healing. It does get easier. It's not easy, but it does get easier to kind of go through, because you have more of a toolkit to pull back on and say, like, this is what this is about. Like, I know that this is how I think about things, or how I spiral, or how I react. And it's easier to kind of catch yourself and do something different. Whereas the first time you go through it, you have no base of what it is and what it means. So it's like it's
Yeah.
impossible to catch.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think like nothing really prepared me for grief, but it did kind of, the way I did come back to sort of what do I know, what can I do, and I think that kind of what can I do, what can I take control of, how can I support myself, had come from, as you say, that journey. But the other thing that I think that might be a good point to kind of like almost kind of leave it with, is that these things happen, and I've started to realize or appreciate them as new levels of being human. Because I think before, like, I was like, Emma, you knew nothing before you had depression. And then all of a sudden, you could see all these people, and you could see all this stuff, this world that you didn't even know existed. And the same thing when I lost my sister, I was like, oh my God, so this is what so many other people walking around, the pain that they're experiencing in their life.
Mm.
That's what other people experience. And I was like, I didn't really know it. I'd had the privilege of not knowing that.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, I guess this gets to make me a better human.
Mhm.
And I think,
Yeah.
like, painful and difficult and challenging as it is, that's one
Mm.
thing that I think, if it leaves you with a little bit more compassion for others, and an ability to see people, which, as you know from my story, is important to me. I wanted to be seen. You can see
Mm.
others. That's a really powerful thing to be able to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a beautiful ending point. Like I ending on compassion for the world. That is exactly where we should close this off. So Emma, I'm gonna wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely incredible to talk to you and have you on the podcast. Thank you. Thank you for listening to another inspiring episode of the Diary of Discovery. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends, family, or anyone else you think might benefit from the stories of hope and transformation. Your feedback means the absolute world to us, so please take a moment to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your reviews help us to reach even more listeners and continue to bring this meaningful content to the world. Until next time, remember, your healing journey is valid. You are never alone, and you have the strength to get through this. Keep shining bright, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Diary of Discovery.